What's happening, guys? Welcome into another boxing breakdown and prediction show for this weekend's super middleweight clash over on DAZN in Florida between one of the biggest pound for pound stars on the planet right now, and Canelo Alvarez, as he faces WBC mandatory contender Avni Yildirim. So let's get into it. I think most people know by now, especially if you're watching this, that Canelo's committed to fighting 4 times a year, and with that level of activity comes obvious filler fights to bridge the gap between the bigger, unified belt clashes along the way. And that's exactly what we have here. Canelo comes off beating the former Unified Ring Magazine champion Callum Smith back in December. And in May, he'll look to unify those super middleweight belts against WBO champion Billy Joe Saunders. And what should be a really mouth-watering fight, at least in my eyes. So, that leaves this Saturday's night's fight. Now, I'm not going to mince words here. For Avni Yildirim to beat Canelo Alvarez on Saturday night would mark, for me at least, one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. I simply can't emphasize that enough. I honestly believe it will be bigger on scale than what Buster Douglas did to Mike Tyson in 1990. And here's why. Yildirim's an incredibly tough guy. Take nothing from him there. And he comes off a blood and guts war against Anthony Dirrell back in 2019. That's 2 years of inactivity to deal with right there as well. So on top of that, Dirrell, despite having significant power himself, doesn't have anywhere near the same level of punch selection as Canelo Alvarez does. And that's a real concern for Yildirim ahead of this one. Yildirim got absolutely flatlined 3.5 years ago by a flush Chris Eubank Jr. hook direct to the jaw in the World Boxing Super Series back in 2017. And Yildirim seems to have learned little about protecting himself since then. He was walking on the flush hooks and uppercuts from Anthony Dirrell in that last fight too. And the uppercut in particular is going to be a huge problem for the Turkish fighter here. Yildirim is a pressure fighter. He likes to sit in the pocket with his opponent, and look to trade big shots. The problem he has, however, is that the high guard he uses to push in on opponents, it sits too far out. It enables space underneath and to the sides, in which a high-level opponent can exploit. And look, Canelo's about as high a level as a technician as you're going to get in boxing these days. And Yildirim got absolutely buckled by a flush uppercut in round one of his fight against Chris Eubank Jr. back in 2017, as we just mentioned, with his knees almost touching the floor, as Eubank was aware of that space in behind Yildirim's guard. And that was even before the thunderous hook that ended it just a few rounds later. And while Eubank does have one of the best uppercuts in boxing, Canelo's is equally as devastating. And with his smaller frame ahead of this fight, is arguably even more of an advantage as he looks to come up underneath Yildirim's high guard to deliver it. I just don't see any way Avni Yildirim makes it to the second half of this fight here on Saturday. Even if Canelo somehow takes it easy on him in there, Yildirim likes to press and will come to Canelo. I think his own toughness will be his own downfall here. Yildirim's game of looking to collapse the pocket is basically going to be a suicide run against a guy as skilled on the inside as Canelo is. And I honestly can see only one outcome here as Canelo gets the KO. You can pick up Canelo rounds 1 to 6 at odds of around -250. That's a play there, as I believe this one finishes early due to Yildirim's aggression, as we mentioned, combined with Canelo's punching power. But I'm personally going to enhance those odds a little bit by combining it with this weekend's other big heavyweight clash over New Zealand between Joseph Parker and Junior Fa, where I expect Parker to get his hand raised in that one. A parlay on both bets, Canelo rounds 1 to 6, and Joseph Parker to win outright is around -195, and I'm pretty comfortable backing that as I fully expect both the cash this weekend. That'll wrap things up for this edition of the Boxing Prediction Show. As always, leave us your thoughts, and you can also catch me over on Twitter at SportsWolf83 and at my handicapper page, Kevin Dolan over at WagerTalk. We'll take a week break and be back the following week with what could be one of the most electric fights of the year in Roman Gonzalez against Juan Francisco Estrada, in their eagerly anticipated rematch. So stay tuned for that. As always, until then, thanks for listening. Slán